All right, why don't we get started? I think we have Sarah here with us. It's going to be a little bit of a departure now. We're going to move beyond the Romantic period into the Impressionistic period. And we actually have, so it's going to go away from, we're going to move from the landscapes and nature to something actually quite a bit different. Today's artist that we're going to highlight is a woman artist, actually from the United States. You can almost call her an American in Paris. Her name is Mary Cassatt. And she actually gained entry to some of the salons during the Impressionistic period, particularly started with, I think, Degas. And so, and keep in mind, this is kind of around the time of the women's suffrage period, as well as the Civil War era here in the US. So this is a time when you actually had a lot of American artists finding their way to Paris to work kind of in a community of other artists, both not just paintings, but also literature. So let's hand it over to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Hope you've had a good week. So yes, as AJ mentioned, we will be focusing on our first female artist of this series, Mary Cassatt. Mary was born in Pittsburgh area in 1844, and she was born into a well-off family. Her father was a stockbroker, and her mother came from a family of bankers. So education and travel were extremely integral to Cassatt's upbringing, and by a young age, she had already visited many of the European capitals. That had a profound impression on her growing up with such global worldly experience. It really
Charles, give me 1 second.
Opened her mind and her viewpoint of the world. And her family was really against the idea of her becoming a professional artist and painter. She was well educated, and they thought that the bohemian nature and the feminist ideas of that community would corrupt her. However, she was very determined. She was a very determined woman. And at the age of 15, she enrolled in the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philly. And at that time, roughly 20% of the student population at the academy were female. But Cassatt was one of the only women who actually wanted to make a career out of being a painter. A lot of women at that time got an education in painting as more of a social currency. But she really wanted to make a career out of it. But there were certain opportunities that only the male students were allowed to partake in. One example being painting models, human models. The women weren't allowed in those sessions. So she grew really impatient with the slow nature of the program and, the fact that she was treated with less opportunity than the male students. So she dropped out and started studying the old masters in her own time. And as AJ mentioned, she moved to Paris in 1866 and studied privately with different artists because at this time, women were not allowed in the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. So she studied on her own with different artists. And eventually, in 1868, her first painting was accepted to the Paris Salon, which I will pull up right now. So this painting is titled A Mandolin Player. As I mentioned, it was created in 1868. And this painting predates Cassatt's exposure to Impressionism. And this is more in the style of realism. This is one of the only paintings of hers from this period in her career. A lot of her earlier paintings were destroyed in a Chicago fire, I believe in 1871. So this is one of the only paintings we have of this period in her career. At this time, the French art scene was already starting to change, and we'll see how her style evolves throughout her career. I think it's interesting to note that the girl in the painting is wearing red, white, and blue, which are, not only the colors of Cassatt's home country, but also the colors of her new home in France. So in 1870, she moved back to Pennsylvania and was really struggling to find inspiration and success. She actually almost gave up her career when she was commissioned to paint 2 pieces in Parma, Italy. So moving back to Europe is when Mary really found her new style and discovered Impressionism. She was notoriously critical of the misogynistic salon culture in Paris at the time, and finally diverged away from genre painting. In 1877, a friend of hers, Edgar Degas, as many of you are probably familiar with, invited her to show her works alongside the Impressionists, who at the time were starting to gain attention in the art world. This painting is titled Little Girl in a Blue Armchair, and this was in 1878. So this painting was one of the first paintings that Cassatt debuted with the Impressionists. So the style uses the application of vibrant colors in separate strokes with little pre-mixing, which allows the eye to merge the results in an impressionistic manner. So it gives the impression of the image rather than a more realistic portrayal of it like the previous painting I showed. So there's kind of a haphazardness to this painting, as you can see, with the arrangement of the big blue chairs, the repose of the young girl, and this highlights Cassatt's freer style of painting with Impressionism. This painting is obviously in contrast to the painting I showed previously that was very posed and poised and had more of a darker tone. And I even zoomed in. Let me pull this up. Here's a zoomed in part. It's the little girl's dress and her kind of plaid waistband. And you can see how the separate colors are individual brushstrokes and how they come together so that when zoomed out, they create the image as a whole. This is why I really love Impressionism, because there's so much specific detail when you look closer. This painting is titled Mother and Child, and this was made in 1914, so a lot later in Cassatt's career. She often portrayed women in their private lives, as you can see with the previous two paintings, but roughly around 1900 and thereafter, she started to focus specifically on the relationship between mother and child. So this painting, the previous two were oil on canvas, and this painting is actually done in pastels, which was, Degas did a lot of pastels and kind of introduced her to that. So she was attracted to pastels as a means for new ideas on color, light, spontaneity. The beauty of pastels was that when hues opposite to each other are layered or placed next to one another, they're actually intensified in richness. So if you look closer, you can see the pink and blue zigzagged marks on the baby's back, on its skin, make depth and shadows on the skin. So you would never really think to add, blue zigzag lines on skin, but it really works in this context. So overall, Mary Cassatt wanted to highlight the lives of women and motherhood in a more honest way, apart from, how it was glorified at the time of being kind of the sole role of women. So I hope you enjoyed a little intro to Mary Cassatt. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. That was fantastic. Anyone have any questions or comments?
Hi, everybody. This is Steve Bott. I'm a fairly new addition to SMA's Associates. Nice to meet you all. Sarah,
Hi.
I wanted to comment that I believe I have seen those paintings, in person, so to speak,
Oh,
at the
fantastic.
Philadelphia Museum.
I'm not sure where they all are. I believe a lot of them that I was researching are at the National Gallery in DC, but I'm sure they're on display in Philly as well.
It's very possible too. I've lived in Arlington, Virginia,
Oh, okay.
so I went to there, and I lived in Philadelphia as well. So I thought it was one of those two.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're on display as well somewhere in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so Steve, welcome on board. And I think it's the Barnsdale, was it the Barnsdale Museum in Philadelphia, which is a very famous museum?
It's called the Barnes Collection.
That's it.
Yeah,
I think I've been there. I had a job near Philly. I think I saw them.
Yeah.
They have a fantastic collection of impressionists there. I think Cezanne is the predominant one at the Barnes Collection.
Interesting.
But both of those museums, Philadelphia and the Barnes Collection, are a great reason to hit Philly for museums.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you, Sarah. That was great.
Yeah, of course. You're welcome. Glad you enjoyed it.
Thanks. If anyone has any suggestions, actually the person that coordinates these art talks with Sarah is Elizabeth Stillman. She's on the Zoom. If anyone has any suggestions on artists you'd like us to highlight, please shoot her or any of us a note.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Sarah.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I think you're on mute. Were you trying to say something?
We're trying, okay, now I'm on. So several of you have sent some very interesting artistic suggestions, and we're going to just try to work all those into our series as we continue. So thank you, and please keep sending in your suggestions. Mary Cassatt was one of the suggestions from the group. So thank you.
Excellent. Great.